Hey, love. This is just a reminder that you have got to love yourself more before you can expect love out of other people. So, I was watching a TikTok earlier that honestly triggered me enough that I was planning on doing something else for this episode. Um, but I decided we need to talk about this. So, welcome to Christianish. My name is Keshia Rice. I'm a dating coach, hypnotherapist, and I help women learn how to heal from their unhealthy relationship patterns and to attract healthy, loving, cherished relationships. Wanted to get all that housekeeping out the way. Now, back to the triggering video. It was a man who, and I get he was probably just trying to be funny, but he was talking about women in their quote unquote soft girl era. And he was saying that women are asking too much from men nowadays. And he was like, didn't you ladies ever have your daddy say no to you? You can't tell me that you grew up with everything that you wanted and now you're expecting a man to give you everything that you want. And a couple of things. One, me personally, as the youngest child and, growing up in a very loving household, yeah, my dad pretty much gave me what I wanted. I'm sure there are a couple of times that he said no, but not really that I can think of. Two, I don't like this energy, this vibe of trying to lower a woman's standards. Because again, I get that the video that he posted was lighthearted and maybe he was trying to be funny about how, saying that it's normal if you're in a relationship for a guy to say no to you every once in a while, and for you to not be so spoiled. But I feel like the message that can be interpreted from things like that is that women should lower their standards and not expect as much from men. And there's some women for whom that might be true, like maybe. Unfortunately, my experience being a dating coach for 6 years now is that that is not the story of most women who come to me. Most women who come to me have put everything into other people at some point in their lives. So this could be a terrible romantic relationship with a man. This could be family members that they give and give and give. This could be friendship. But the point is that at some point, they've given their everything to a relationship and gotten less than nothing out of it. They have given their all, and their kindness was taken for weakness, and they ended up being drained by that relationship. So, no, the experience that I am seeing more often than not is not women who are spoiled to death and are abusive and berate and are mean to the men that they date. The experiences that I typically see are women who are auditioning and trying to perform for a man who haven't learned how to decenter men yet, who put other people's needs and priorities ahead of their own needs and priorities, and then end up drained and unhappy. That is why I was so motivated to become a dating coach, because I wanted to save women from that. I wanted to break these generational curses. I wanted to, especially growing up in church, and there's so much in churches of people using single women to, one, perform a lot of unpaid labor in church, and then to constantly send messages that basically amount to, you need to be perfect, you need to be a people pleaser, you need to overgive, and then you need to sit in a pew, and one day you'll be lucky enough for some man to come through and discover your worth. Like, that's not how we do things around here. That's not how I want any woman to ever feel. So again, I'm not trying to slam the man who made the video, because I get that he was probably just trying to be funny with it. But I don't find it funny, right? That this whole idea of women lowering their standards, because for so many women, the bar is already in hell. We do not need to let it go any lower than it already has been. Now, that brings me to my final point. What it takes to actually be loved and cherished in a relationship. And that is knowing that you deserve it. We teach people how to love us. We teach people how to treat us. We are the ones who set the expectations. And because of that, there's a lot to be said for, this guy's whole point about, like, oh, did your father ever say no to you? There's a lot to be said for being raised in a household where you had an active father who was working hard to provide and take care of you. And not all women had that experience. I get that. I'm getting to that in a second. But that mentality of knowing that you were taken care of, it carries forward into your future relationships. And then it sets the expectations for how you want to be treated in the future. And it causes you to have boundaries and standards that are higher, and that also are, I'm looking for the right words here. It causes you to set boundaries and standards that are a level that you prevent yourself from being hurt as often or taken advantage of. I've told the story before on my social media about how when I was in college, I was leaving a class, and there was this guy who, he and I were in some classes together. He sees me and he's immediately like, hey, let's go hang out and walk and talk for a little bit. So he and I are walking. We end up walking off campus, and there's a McDonald's not too far away. So we ended up walking to the McDonald's, having lunch there. He was like, yeah, I like you. I want to get to know you, all of that. We talk. It's cool. And later on, I mentioned this offhand to my dad, right? So my dad tells me to come home. And I went to college about 2 hours away from my hometown. So, that weekend I come home and my dad takes me out to a nice restaurant for lunch or dinner. I don't remember what time of day it was, but we had a nice meal. So we're in the middle of this meal, and my dad is asking me if I'm having a good time. And I tell him that I am. He asks me if I enjoy the restaurant, and I tell him that I do. And he looks at me and he says, good. The next time that some guy tries to take you to McDonald's, tell him no thank you. I can have a better time with my father. Right? And that was his way of setting an example for me of what to expect in a relationship and how I should be treated. Now, for some women listening to me right now, this is what you need to remember. If you grew up in a household where there was a lot of love, you were cared for, you were provided for, if your parents or guardian could do that for you, then a man can do that for you too, right? And you should expect to be shown love that same way. If you did not have that growing up, then a couple of things to keep in mind. One, most of the women that I work with are women of faith. So specifically, most of the women that I work with are Christian, but also, I have clients who are Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, all of that. I bring this up because if you are a woman of faith, then you have this belief that God takes care of you and wants the best for you. Off the top of my head, I can think of scriptures about how I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I can think about in Jeremiah where God says that he knows the plans that he has for me, plans to prosper me and to give me a good ending. And when I think about things like that, if God only wants good things in my life, then why would he put a man in my life who doesn't want to take care of me, who doesn't cherish me, who doesn't look out for my best interests to the best of his abilities? And I want to say that because I'm not necessarily saying that this man has to be a billionaire. My husband is not. But I see so many women in relationships with people who are stingy, in relationships with takers, in relationships with abusers. And if you truly believe that God wants what's best for you, why would you allow someone in your life who you know darn well, there's other words I want to say, but y'all know we keep it clean on this podcast. You know darn well that they don't want what's best for you. And therefore, these are not the people that should be in your life if you are for real about trying to fulfill the purpose that God has for you. Now, beyond family members, beyond your relationship with God, is also your relationship with yourself, right? When you are determined to give the best for yourself and to give yourself a good life, you stop being willing to accept people who try to give you less. So I mentioned the whole story with my dad and taking me to a restaurant and, telling me that McDonald's is beneath me for a date, right? After I graduated college and I got a job and started making my own money, I started doing that for myself. I started having date nights by myself. I took myself to restaurants, I took myself to the museum, I took myself to the movies, all of that. And one of the things that I noticed was, one, it made me more confident in dating because I got very comfortable with being alone. So because of that, I wasn't in any ways desperate for a man. Now, don't get me wrong, I wanted a relationship, I desired marriage, but I definitely got to the point where I didn't need marriage. And that made my discernment so much greater because now I was filtering from a lens of how can this person add to my life in general, not I need this right now. It's the same as when you go to the grocery store, right? You know not to go to the grocery store hungry because if you go to the grocery store hungry, what inevitably happens is that you always come home with junk because instead of going to the grocery store with a sound mind and you're full, so you're thinking about the things that you're going to eat over the next couple of days or over the next week, and you're getting healthy and nutritious stuff. When you go to the grocery store hungry, you start seeing all the convenient things that you can eat right away. And those things aren't necessarily the healthiest. Same with relationships. When you are hungry for love and attention, you will blow right past all the red flags that someone presents to you because they are there in front of you. They're physically available. Even if they aren't necessarily emotionally available, they are physically available, and you'll go for that. So you really have to, first of all, show gratitude for any other love that you have in your life. So that is love from God. That is love from family, friends, any of that you have. But you also have to really practice giving love to yourself. But second, this applies not only just for your life, but also just for your weekend, right? One of the things that I noticed when I started taking myself on dates was if a man would ask me out, my standards were higher because my first question was always like, okay, well, then what do you have in mind? What do you want to do when we go out on this date? And a guy would tell me, oh, I was thinking we could do this, or I was thinking we could do that. And I would evaluate the plans. And honestly, if my plans that I made for myself sounded better, I would just decline the date. And in doing so, again, it not only increased my standards and improved my discernment, but it also definitely weeded out a lot of men because, I was only willing to go out with men who put forth effort. And again, emphasis on effort doesn't mean that someone has to be a billionaire or any of that. But it was simple things. Like I did the whole online dating thing, right? And I was on a few different apps when I was single, and I only accepted dates with men who actually took the time to look at my profile, see what my interests were, and then come up with a date that was based on what they knew I was interested in. So if I said, look, this is a good example. I remember saying in a profile once that I absolutely hated horror movies. And this guy asked me out, and when I asked him what he wanted to do, he brought up going to the movies, which okay, not the most creative idea, but it's not a terrible idea. And then when I asked what he wanted to see, it was whatever horror movie was out at that time. And I know, again, I remember I had clearly mentioned in my profile how much I hate horror movies, right? So it was things like that I wasn't willing to overlook and be like, okay, well, the rest of his profile is nice or whatever is cool. And maybe he just missed that fact. No, like that was already a you're out. So when you have higher standards, you save yourself from a lot of disappointment. And I'm going to be clear. You are going to have fewer matches on online dating profiles. You're going to meet fewer men when you're out in public. You are going to go on fewer dates. Like the dates do get further in between. You will have fewer options, but the options that you have are so much better. And at the end of the day, it only takes one, right? So it is so important that we not break our own hearts and that we do what we can to increase our discernment and increase our standards. And that starts with increasing our love for ourselves. So if you like help with that, I would love to guide you on that journey of increasing your self-love, of no longer settling for less, and of learning how to attract partners who are not only just physically available, but also emotionally and spiritually available. So if you'd like to talk about what that would look like, you can schedule a call with me and we can talk about my program From Toxic to Thriving, and we can go from there. I will have the link to schedule a call with me, and if you're watching this on YouTube, the description, if you're listening to the podcast, in the show notes. So make sure you do that. And I will talk to you very soon. But I love you very much. And I hope that this will remind you to love yourself a little bit more. Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by Contessa Digital.